Thank you for joining us in this very special liturgy that we call the Liturgy of Palm Sunday. And it is a liturgy with a lot of drama and a lot of images that are still alive in our minds and hearts. Even as we began this Mass, we began outside with the palms being blessed. And the reason why those palms are important, the palms that so many of you are holding in your hands, because at this very moment, at the beginning of this Palm Sunday liturgy, was a recognition that the people that had been following Jesus, the people of Galilee and the people of Jerusalem, were celebrating Jesus as someone special, even the Messiah and their King. And they shouted with joy. They shouted cries of blessing. They shouted cries of affirmation and approval. So we begin this liturgy in a high note. And then we come inside, and then we have our readings, and our gospel begins to pick up on what happened days later after this beautiful procession of Jesus into Jerusalem, when all the people were for him. And we have, in that beginning of this gospel, another moment of high note for us, the moment when Jesus takes bread and says those words that we will hear soon. This is my body. And he gives his body to the disciples. Takes the cup and he says, this is the cup of my blood. And he shares that chalice with his disciples. This is a special moment, we know. But suddenly it turns dark. It becomes not a moment to continue on this high note, but a moment of darkness. Because right after that, when Jesus says to his disciples, look, there's someone here who is eating with me at this very table, breaking bread with him. He's going to deny me. And all of a sudden, what happens? His disciples, they began to argue with one another. They began to say to one another, no, I'm the greatest. I'm the most important. I would never do that. And where there was unity, there's alienation. And they began to fall apart. And little by little, we see how this group of people that were so close to Jesus, how they run away and they fall apart. They're alienated. I'd like to just conclude this reflection by looking at three women that we have in our gospel, our passion. The first one is someone we don't know much about. She was a servant. She's there in the courtyard. Peter is following Jesus. Peter, who was saying, I'm going to die with you. This Peter is there looking at Jesus as he's being judged and condemned and scourged. All of those things. All of a sudden, Peter is so helpless. And this woman says to Peter, oh, Peter, you're one of these disciples. What does Peter say? No, I'm not. Now, this is the Peter who had Jesus come into his home when his mother-in-law was sick. Jesus cured her. This was the Peter who was sinking in the sea, and Jesus grabbed him and saved him. This is the Peter that was with Jesus as he fed thousands of people, as he cured the centurion's son, this is the Peter had walked with Jesus. And all of a sudden, in this moment, he says, because of this woman saying, you're one of his disciples, I don't know him. That brought a meditation in my own life when I hear sometimes people say, you too are his disciple, and I am not strong enough to say, yes, I am. Then the next group of women that we hear and see in our today's gospel are these women of Jerusalem. And he calls them daughters of Jerusalem. And what are these women of Jerusalem doing? They're crying. They're feeling bad that Jesus is being taken out to be crucified. They share his suffering, his sense of being taken to be crucified to death. And it hurts them. And they began to cry. So what did Jesus say to them? O daughters of Jerusalem, don't cry for me. Cry for yourselves. For there's something that is happening here that you may not be aware of. But wait, something will come out of this that will bring in your lives redemption and salvation. And the last group of women, not just a servant person that we don't know anything about, not just those women of Jerusalem that was following Jesus on the way of the cross, but it says here, it's about the women who had come from Galilee with him and followed him. So these women, they were kind of hanging back, but they were still not running away. They were looking at the scene of his crucifixion, and I'm sure their hearts broke when Jesus died on the cross. But they didn't go home right away. They followed the body of Jesus to that tomb. And they followed the body of Jesus because they wanted to know, where was Jesus buried? And they wanted to know where Jesus was buried so they could return, it says here, and prepare spices and perfume oils. For we'll see these women again on Easter Sunday. So let us reflect on our own journeys on this passion account. Are we with Peter or with the disciples sleeping? Are we arguing with one another? Are we crying needlessly without understanding what's happening? Are we with the thief who says, recognizes his own sinfulness? Are we with the women who see Jesus being buried and willing to come back Easter Sunday to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus?